Hi, I'm Mark Green with the Oklahoman in Washington. I'm here with my colleague Chris Castile, the bureau chief here in Washington, as well as Senator Jim Inhofe, who's here at the National Press Building to join with religious leaders in a petition drive to collect signatures of Christians who don't believe in global warming hype and believe that it's hurting the poor and the disadvantaged around the world. Senator, tell us a little bit about the petition drive.
Well, I'm not involved in that, but I always said that probably the smartest things that could have been done for those who want to destroy the conservative agenda that the evangelicals have is to somehow get them steered away from their core agenda and put them into this idea of global warming. And they were successful in doing it through the National Association of Evangelicals for a while. The guy's name was Richard Cizik. Mm-hmm. And now people realize that, and even the National Association of Evangelicals have disavowed the notion that they have a position the issue is man-made gases, anthropogenic gases, CO2, methane, causing major change in the environment. And we believe that the science is just not there. In fact, we have many more scientists now on this side of the issue. However, that isn't the major issue. The major issue is what it cost. Mm-hmm. And if you looked at originally the Kyoto, I got to confess to you guys that when I became chairman 5 years ago of the Environment Public Works Committee, I thought that it was probably man-made gases causing this, because that's all you heard. Until we did some checking after the Wharton School had put a price tag on what it would cost to ratify that and live by the emissions of Kyoto. And the range was between $300 and $330 billion a year. Now we're looking at one that is even more severe than that. Mm-hmm. The price tag on this one is about $471 billion a year. Now that means for Oklahoma and Texas, they'd be hit the hardest. Each family of four would average a tax increase of $3,300, and we contend that you don't get anything for that. So this group is a bunch of evangelicals that are going to be meeting today that have gotten together and say, wait a minute, we believe in our core values, we believe in the right to life and all these things, and we're not going to sacrifice that for an issue that is not a real issue.
So is this a little bit of a pushback then against the Cizik group?
Oh, yeah, well, I've been pushing back from Cizik since he came on the scene. He was one of them who, this was his idea to do this, just to shift the focus. Cizik himself is not of the philosophy. He doesn't embrace the core values of the evangelicals. But he's enjoying this, and he's out making speeches, but he is not endorsed by the National Association of Evangelicals. That's very important.
Senator, you've been probably the primary skeptic in this town about the idea of man-made global warming, but do you think the planet is in a warming cycle? And if so, how serious do you think it is? And a lot of what the other evangelical groups are saying is that global warming could hurt the poor because of the effects of global warming on nations on poor nations.
Well, what would hurt the poor is if you had a cap and trade and did a mandatory reduction in CO2. One of our witnesses was the head of Catholic Charities for the state of Ohio, and he did a study as to how much it was going to hurt the poor people. CBO has done a study as to how much it would hurt disproportionately the poor people if we were to have some kind of a rationing of CO2. So now, to answer your first question, though, it's interesting, and I think no one disagrees with this. The warming trend that was there in the 90s subsided in 2001, and it has actually dropped a little bit since that time. Now, the global warming people who are playing the hype want to say, well, this is just temporary, it's going to start warming again. But, I'm old enough to remember what happened back in the 70s, and the same people, the United Nations and the NAS, at that time said another ice age is coming, and we're all going to die. So the people behind this are the far left environmentalists. They want to stop construction. They just don't want. They want to stop this machine called America. They don't want coal-fired generation. They don't want nuclear. They don't want oil and gas. And frankly, you can't run this country without all three of those.
Senator McCain, I don't think you would call him a leftist, but he came out with his own cap and trade proposal last week to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, you helped block a McCain bill on global warming a few years ago. Would you do that again if he were president next year?
I sure would. Let's keep in mind, though, that the bill today that is going to be considered in June on the floor of the Senate is the Lieberman-Warner bill. and that's the one that's even more severe than his bill was in '05. And I would have no hesitation in fighting that the same way. But keep in mind, he doesn't embrace, he's not supporting Lieberman Warner. He's opposed to it. I'm talking about McCain.
Senator,
because it doesn't have a nuclear component, and it just drains us of our ability to.
one other kind of global
energy.
warming related question, Senator. Yesterday, the Interior Department put polar bears on the endangered species list, and I know that you've talked against that notion in the past. What do you think of their decision?
Well, you know,
why do you disagree with it?
I've known Dirk Kempthorne for many, many years. And in fact, he actually was on the committee that I wasn't chairman yet at that time, but he was chairman of the subcommittee on endangered species. And I've disagreed with him then, I disagree with him now. There is a problem with the polar bear, and that's a problem of overpopulation. Of the 13 populations in Canada of the polar bear, all but 2 are actually expanding and are growing. And the 2 that aren't, and that's mostly western Hudson Bay area, it's because of the hunting regulations that are being changed at this time. So the real motive behind that is to have, if they could get that listed as an endangered species, then that would open the door for lawsuits. If you wanted to drill a well in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, you would have a lawsuit keeping you from doing that, because that would somehow endanger the polar bear. That's how serious it is.
I suppose you'll take any action you can to fight it.
Oh, yes, I will.
All right. Senator, thank you for joining us today and sharing your thoughts on these subjects. Stay with the Oklahoman and News OK TV for the latest in information and analysis.